Oh, this is a video about Warhammer 4000 requested by K9365. They mentioned it a couple months ago, but I didn't. Never heard of it, and then they reminded me again today and asked me to do a video about it. Said that it was related. It was like modeled off the Roman Empire. They wanted me to do a video as a historian perspective. And and so yeah, it's like set in 40,000 years in the future, so it has all the different like technology of warfare. That it's kind of like a 13-year-old boy's wet dream for like war with all the technology you can think of. And the person said it was modeled off the Roman Empire, and so they have like emperors and stuff, and but it's like space-bearing civilizations, and so and they're just like constantly at war. So there's all these different like war soldiers, and then like immortal war, like lords who like kind of like Dune, like people live forever and then they transform or something, and then they have like the scantily clad like war maidens or something who have to fight or they get killed or something. And I was like scantily clad war maidens, and so I typed them up, and they were all dressed completely in armor. But anyway, yeah. So it's like it's super popular with like I think games and movies and action figures and stuff. So when I saw the explanation of it, it was like the long form explanation, somebody talking about it for like a half hour because I was going to do a video about it. I got the impression that it is like a spiritual hell realm because like it doesn't really follow the rules of physical world reality, because you couldn't actually in reality have a space-bearing civilization that's just constantly at war because they just destroy everywhere they go. I guess they could come up with like explanations. Maybe they have like AI and like robots that fix it up, and so they're on these like planets that they're completely destroyed, but they use the resources to make weapons and fight. And yeah, so I think like in terms of reality, I think it's pretty in like third dimensional reality, it's pretty like unlikely. Maybe somewhere in the universe there could be like some space-bearing civilizations who live like that for like a little bit before they kind of kill themselves out. It's not like sustainable. Kind of like the Mediterranean Ocean at one point was dry land, and then the Straits of Gibraltar like burst, and then water just flowed in and filled up the Mediterranean Sea over like 100 years or whatever. So like 100 years, I don't know how long it was, but I should go look it up. Or they have these huge flow of like water coming in, so that's like not sustainable. It's like a certain period of history, bizarre period of history in a certain period of time. But that's the only like explanation, like real scenario I could imagine where something like that could exist. Like maybe a bunch of other aliens that's what happens when a bunch of aliens give too much technology, like Promethean giving fire to the monkey people, technology to all these like primitive minded people. So it's kind of relates to us in that way. Like if you just give earthlings a bunch of like technology to grow, and we just overpopulate the planet like crazy and kill off the planet, kind of like the gray aliens and their planet, where they killed off the Earth and had to wormhole into here to keep their civilization and their soul reincarnation alive, so they could mold back in with us. But so maybe we're like channeling that world sort of. But yeah, it kind of just I think situations like that are more like common when it's just like a fantasy situation, like how a bunch of kids on Earth would sit around and play Dungeons and Dragons and their little video games, and they're doing make believe and some like super violent escapade. Maybe when a bunch of people die and they have like maybe yeah, they just have war lust, maybe because they're like twisted because they were like the emperor, a bunch of like emperors of Rome, or like wealth discrepancy people who have too much power, and then they die and they're all crazy, like a bunch of Donald Trumps get together, and like nobody's compatible with them, so they all have to meet somewhere in the universe in the etheric realm to like special hell realm, maybe in the center of the earth, to like fight each other until they're done fighting, and they can kind of manipulate the laws of physics to keep going. But yeah, I mean, I think it's indicative to imagine a world like that in 40,000 in the future, years in the future, is indicative that the psychology of the people, and that's it's such a popular thing, that the psychology of the people alive today in the world are just focused, like they don't have a vision for the future. They can't imagine a peaceful future, you know? Like if you look at all of the different movies that have to do with like the near future or even far future, like it's all disasters, like zombies, apocalypse, alien invasion, destroying the earth. You know, Star Wars with the Emperor and the Empire going around and killing everybody. Like everybody's worst vision of how of like an empire would be, only on a galactic scale. And then like Star Wars is probably the most accurate. I mean, Star Trek probably the most accurate. But even with Star Trek, they come across a bunch of like alien species who are more advanced than us, but they're like less physically or like socially developed. Like nobody can actually imagine like a peaceful world. You know, nobody can write a book or make a movie about the future with future technology where like nothing is wrong, and like the big issue is like deciding, you know, what color to paint your building or something like that. You know, like I have an idea of a futuristic story. You just create like a world, you know, and then you make just a regular story out of it. But it's not really even that much about the story. It's just an excuse to show off the world, you know, like I have an idea about the Exceed 4000 building on Atlantis, where you get between the buildings from flying wingsuits, from like taking a ride to the top of the building. So, and then flying like with those, and like hang gliders with a bunch of people on them, and like tame animals and nature, and like mountain biking and all that kind of stuff. And that kind of seems like a fun thing, and you just don't have that much drama, you know. But it's mainly about the world. That's the kind of stuff we should imagine more. But and I think people will eventually get sick of all of these like ultra violent like lack of vision, of the positive vision of the future. But I actually asked ChatGTP to tell me what was happening in the future, just without any guidance at all. And I don't know if there was any rhyme or reason. There didn't seem like there would be, but I was going to paste that onto my timeline whenever I got around to it. It's all on my notes on my computer. Yeah. And it was like what ChatGTP imagined was for the future was just super like peaceful utopian world, like festivals. So we just kept thinking of festivals like marking like unity festivals and stuff. It was really boring and repetitive, but you know, it doesn't, if you ask ChatGPT, it's not programmed to think of some crazy ass like war and death and destruction and torture and emperors fighting each other and super powerful guys with weapons and then slaves. And it's like a perfect example of people just extrapolating the worst part of history into the future. People like to get really cynical about the past, and like it's all a might makes right, and that's the only thing that makes it go around, like the world go around in the past. But if you look at history, the thing that makes history are the people who with positive visions. You know, the people who invent things, the people who start new laws, and then it kind of deteriorates from people with the lack of vision. So I'm not really, Warhammer 4000 isn't really my thing. If I was a kid, I would have gotten bored with it after maybe like an hour of looking at it and exploring all the cool little weapons and stuff they have. Yeah, it kind of seems like something that kids would be into, you know, like if you give a bunch of kids a bunch of rocks and baseball bats and a glass house, they would their idea of a good time would be to just destroy the house instead of clean the windows and create something artistic with it. So yeah, that's what I think about Warhammer 4000. I don't think it has a whole lot to do with actual future history, and it has more to do with like showing what our general psychology is. That's more popular. You know, we live in kind of a day where the more mainstream you are, the best you are at being mainstream, the more popular you're going to be. That's why like all of these historians and on YouTube, the most popular people are the most skeptical people who don't believe anything. Like you upload a video about like with millions of subscribers, like Mini Minuteman Rossi. I can't watch his videos because he's just skeptical about everything. And then he like just fills up space with like fancy editing but doesn't even say anything, and like but that's what gets the hits instead of people with an actual vision of the future. I mean, if you were to ask any one of these like mainstream closed-minded historians and stuff who don't believe in ancient civilization from the past, and like asking real questions of how the hell did they build those stones, carve those stones in Egypt and all that kind of stuff. I think it means that they just don't have a vision. They don't have an open mind of seeing that something else and beautiful and is in the future and other ways to do things. You know, like I think they built those stones by levitating them and turning them into like putty, and then they just sliced through it like putty, and then they pieced them together. I was watching Uncharted X and Temple of Osiris or whatever, the Osirion. He was showing how the rocks were put together where they were like, they pushed out. It looked like it was like butter, and they squeezed them together and the bottoms kind of pushed out some. And that's how they got them to get so squeezed together, because they were like putty when they did it, and they were able to move them because they levitated them. Like a movie like that would be cool, you know, like a past of that's serious, you know, like my Atlantis. I say I found Atlantis, and why not rebuild it there and have like a utopian world where nothing, you know, that gets destroyed just because of something that's out of their control from like a comet or something, instead of like a war, a space war. Because every single show we have, it's just way too saturated. It's all space wars, Battlestar Galactica. It's like when you want to see a future of spacefarer, it's kind of like watching World War II, like with Star Wars. There's flying around in airplanes in space, shooting at each other with lasers and crashing, and it's like there's no paradigm shift. It's just the same idea blown up into a greater scale. But it's never like that, you know. The rules always change, you know. Like we don't live in a steampunk world where we're flying around in like propeller airplanes and like all over the place, almost crashing into each other. You know, like if we were gonna get flying cars, they would be like levitation machines, and you know, if we were gonna get into a conflict in the future, it wouldn't be like a hot war. It'd be more like a courtroom, or like a propaganda argument or something. And you know, and like people couldn't imagine there being like cell phones and stuff now from a couple hundred years ago. So yeah, I think people really should kind of like be a little bit ready to change their vision of the future and not have it so similar to the past, just with more technology. Because that's what Warhammer 40,000 is, like, to the extreme. It's like if you were going to put a bunch of like barbarians in a bunch of spaceships, that's what would happen. Yeah, but that's what people are into. So yeah, that's what I think about Warhammer 40,000. I can't really relate to it. But if they wanted to be like scientifically accurate, it would be fun to like calculate how quickly stuff would mutate, you know, because you could look at that in history. I think it's an average of one gene per 100,000 mutates, like in your lifetime, and so or like 1 in 100,000 people or something like would have a mutation, and then that would allow you to move, and so you could like evolve, and so like you could compare like how much we've changed physically over the last 40,000 years, like with the Cro-Magnon, and then you could imagine what humans would look like in 40,000 years and make them look a little bit different. That would be, I don't know if they have some of those characters, but that would be interesting. Like if I were to make a movie about like Atlantis from 40,000 or America in 40,000 years in the future, I could imagine I would try to make the people look physically a little bit different, like 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 there's Bashar the alien. He says they look different. They have less hair. Like the men don't have hair, and the women have a little bit of white hair and stuff. But those people are like descendants of Zetas, who are like the gray aliens who had to live underground. I visioned people in the 40,000 years in the future being like athletes, like our idea of beauty, like super muscular, lots of hair, still the skin tight suits, but lots of ornamentation, and they spend their time like competing, like for mind and body and stuff. That would be kind of cool. But it's all beautiful, and it's not like skinny bald people walking around with little taser guns because they're afraid they'll get their ass kicked by you. But yeah, so I'm not really into it, but that's my request vlog. What I think about Warhammer 40,000 requested by K9365. If you have any requests, send them my way. I like requests later.